Brother told me I had to share my $18,000 destination wedding gift money with his wife's family or I wasn't welcome at the rehearsal dinner. My parents said nothing, so I transferred the funds back to my own account, sent one text, and watched the whole thing unravel from 3 states away. That's not where this starts, though. That's just where I finally stopped. Let me back up. I'm 31 years old. I work in pharmaceutical regulatory affairs, which is a fancy way of saying I spend 60 hours a week reading FDA submission guidelines and writing documents that nobody outside my industry will ever care about. It pays well. Embarrassingly well for someone who spent her 20s eating ramen and sleeping on a futon. I drive a used Civic. I have a 1-bedroom apartment in Atlanta that I've owned outright since last year. I don't take lavish vacations. I don't wear designer clothes. I have one nice thing in my life, which is a savings account that I built from scratch. Dollar by dollar. Starting from the day I graduated college with $40,000 in student debt and a mother who told me she was proud of me but couldn't help me financially because they had already done so much. My older brother Weston is 36. He married his wife, Tamsin, 4 years ago in a small ceremony at a venue outside Charlotte. I was the maid of honor. I paid for my own dress, my own flight, my own hotel, and I also quietly paid the florist deposit when Weston texted me in a panic 3 weeks before the wedding because the credit card he'd used had been declined and he didn't want Tamsin to find out. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just sent the money. That's what I did. That's what I'd always done. By the time this story starts, I had been quietly subsidizing my family for about 5 years. There was the time my parents' furnace died in January and I paid the replacement cost because they were in between paychecks and the home warranty had lapsed. $3,200. My dad called to thank me and then spent 40 minutes telling me about the new fishing rod he was thinking of buying. There was the time my brother's car needed an engine rebuild and I lent him the money, which we both understood was never coming back. There was the slow, steady drip of birthday gifts that were always too big, Christmas checks that were always too generous, and the unspoken agreement that because I had more than them, I owed them more of myself. I was not resentful. Not yet. I loved them. I wanted to be generous. I had convinced myself that this was just what family did, that someday the dynamic would even out, that eventually they would see me as a person and not a financial resource. The shift started 8 months ago when Tamsin's mother announced that she wanted to throw a vow renewal ceremony for her parents' 40th anniversary, a destination event. Sedona, Arizona. 70 guests. Catered dinner. A photographer. Tamsin, being the oldest of 4 siblings, immediately took on the role of organizer, and my brother, being Weston, immediately told her that whatever she needed, they would figure it out. I found out about it the same way I found out about most things in my family, through a group text. My mom forwarded me a message from Tamsin with a rough budget breakdown and a note that said, and I want to be exact here because I read it 4 times, "Your sister is doing so well right now. She might want to consider being the anchor sponsor for this. It would mean so much to the family." The anchor sponsor. I stared at that phrase for a long time. I did not immediately respond. I made coffee. I sat on my couch. I thought about the word sponsor, the way you turn a strange object over in your hands to figure out what it is. That word had never been applied to me before within a family context. Donor, sure, in practice. Helper, yes. But sponsor felt different. Sponsor felt like a contract. Sponsor felt like a transaction had been named out loud for the first time. I texted my brother directly, just me and him. "Hey, saw the message from Mom. What's the actual ask here?" He replied fast, which told me he had been waiting. So the budget for the vow renewal is coming in around $18,000 total. Tamsin's siblings can each chip in maybe $2K, but they're all kind of strapped right now. Mom and Dad are giving what they can. Probably a $1,500 combined. We were hoping you could cover the rest. Like $13,000 or so. You'd be the main sponsor, basically. There'd be a little shout-out in the program. Tamsin's mom wants to acknowledge everyone who contributed. A shout-out in the program. I set my phone down. I picked it back up. Weston, that's $13,000 for a party for Tamsin's parents. I don't even know her parents that well. I've met them twice. I know, but they're family now. And do you know how much this means to Tamsin? She's been so stressed. And honestly, you're the only one in a position to make this happen. There it was. The sentence that had been the engine of my entire adult life. You're the only one in a position. I told him I needed to think about it. He said okay, but they needed an answer by the end of the week because the venue deposit was due. I spent 3 days thinking about it seriously. I called my closest friend from college who lives in Seattle and has no stake in any of this, and I walked her through the entire situation. She was quiet for a moment after I finished, and then she said, "The fact that you're even considering this is the answer right there." I knew she was right. But knowing something is right and being able to do it are two separate skills, and I had spent 31 years building the wrong one. I called my mom. I needed to hear whether she genuinely believed this was a reasonable request, or whether she had just forwarded the message without thinking. She had thought about it. "Honey, I know it's a lot, but think about what it would mean for Tamsin's family. And think about what it would mean for your brother. He wants so badly to come through for her. You know he'd do the same for you." "Would he, though?" I asked, not cruelly, just honestly. "Of course he would. He's your brother. He still owes me $4,000 from the car." There was a pause. "That's not the same thing," she said. "How is it not the same thing?" "Because that was a loan between siblings. This is a family event. This is about honoring 40 years of a marriage. This is bigger than money." I recognize the rhetorical move. When the amount is uncomfortable, shift to the sentiment. Make the dollar figure feel small next to the emotion. I had fallen for it many times before. "Mom, I'm not saying no yet. I'm just asking questions." "Don't ask so many questions that you miss the moment," she said. "Tamsin's family doesn't have a lot. This would be the most beautiful thing that's happened to them in years. You have the ability to give them that. Most people never get to do something like this for someone." I hung up feeling like I was the problem. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and I did something I had never done before. I wrote down every dollar I had given or lent to my family in the past 5 years. Not to make myself feel righteous, just to see it clearly. When I got to the bottom of the list, the total was $31,460. I looked at that number for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and I pulled up the county property records for my brother's address. I don't know exactly what I was looking for, some kind of proof that my hesitation was justified, maybe. What I found was worse than I expected. There was a second mortgage on the house, taken out 14 months ago for $40,000. There was also a mechanic's lien filed by a contractor who had apparently done renovation work and not been paid. And when I cross-referenced the court records the way I'd learned to do through my job, I found a judgment against Weston's name. Capital 1, $8,000, filed 8 months ago. Status, unsatisfied. My brother was not strapped for cash in the way that regular middle-class people are sometimes strapped for cash. He was in serious financial trouble, and nobody had told me. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept cycling through the same thought. They weren't just asking me to sponsor a party. They were asking me to paper over a structural collapse with party favors. The end of the week came. I hadn't given an answer. Weston texted again. "Hey, we kind of need to know. The venue needs the deposit tomorrow morning. Can you do it?" I wrote back. "I'm not going to be the anchor sponsor. I'm sorry, I can contribute $500 like everyone else, but I can't give $13,000 for this." What happened next happened fast. Weston, wow, okay. Then nothing for 2 hours. Then my mom, "I can't believe you did this. Tamsin is devastated. She's been crying for an hour. We had to tell the venue we needed more time. You could have just said no sooner instead of making everyone wait." Then Tamsin, directly to me for the first time, a long message. I'm going to paraphrase because the full thing ran to 6 paragraphs, but the core of it was that she had always suspected I didn't fully accept her as family. That this proved it, that blood doesn't mean anything if you only show up for the easy parts. And that she hoped I was happy with my decision. Then Weston again, "Do you understand what you've done?" Her mom was so excited. Her parents have never had anything like this. "You had one chance to do something that actually mattered, and you said no to protect your savings account. I don't even recognize you right now." I read all of it. I didn't respond to any of it that night. The next morning, there was a new message in the family group chat. Weston had added my parents and 3 of Tamsin's siblings to a thread. The message was from Tamsin's younger sister, who I have met exactly once at the original wedding. Just want to say that some people in this family have made it very clear where their priorities are. My parents deserve better. We'll figure this out without her. Without her. Meh. I was now her in a group thread I hadn't been removed from. My dad, who speaks rarely but lands hard when he does, sent one line. Weston told us what happened. Very disappointed, sweetheart. I sat with that for a long moment. Very disappointed, sweetheart. The punctuation of that sentence. The comma before sweetheart, which was meant to soften it but instead just made it feel more clinical, like a report card note. I want to be honest about what happened inside me when I read that, because I think it matters. It wasn't anger at first. It was grief. Real grief, the kind that sits low and heavy in your chest. I had been trying for years to earn a seat at a table where I was never really a guest. I had been writing checks to buy something that was never actually for sale. And when I finally said no to one check, the mask came off with a speed that told me it had been barely attached to begin with. Then the anger came. Not the hot, sputtering kind, the cold kind. The kind that clarifies instead of clouds. I went back to the group text. I read Tamsin's brother-in-law's message again. Some people in this family. I read my dad's note. I thought about the $31,000 on my legal pad. Then I did something I'd been too afraid to do for years. I told the truth. I typed it into the group chat, which was the wrong venue, probably, but I was done performing for side conversations. I want to address this directly since it seems like we're all here. I love Weston, and I want the best for Tamsin's family. But I've given over $31,000 to this family in the past 5 years in loans and gifts, most of which were never repaid and none of which were ever acknowledged. I said no to one request, for $13,000 for an event for people I barely know, and I'm being told I failed as a family member. I'm also going to be honest about something I found in public records, because I think everyone in this thread deserves to know the situation clearly. Weston and Tamsin are dealing with some serious financial difficulties right now. A second mortgage, a contractor lien, and an unsatisfied court judgment. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. I'm saying it because if this family is going to come together, it should be around the real problem, not around a party that a $13,000 infusion from me would not actually fix. I put my phone face down on the table. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the physical sensation of having held something very heavy for a very long time and finally setting it down. The response was immediate and cacophonic. Tamsin called me a liar. Weston said I had betrayed his trust and violated his privacy. Tamsin's sister said I was vicious and she hoped I was proud of myself. My mom called me on the phone, and when I picked up, she was crying, which she almost never does, and she said, "How could you? In front of everyone. That is private." "It's public record, Mom," I said. "I looked it up on the county clerk's website. Anyone can see it." "That is not the point. You humiliated your brother." "I didn't create the situation. I just described it." "You described it to hurt him." "I described it because his family was coming at me in a group chat for not funding a party, and I thought they might want to understand the full picture." She went quiet. I could hear her breathing. "You don't understand what it's like," she finally said. "To have a child who is struggling, to watch and not be able to help. We were hoping this trip would give them something to look forward to. A reset. You were going to be part of giving them that." And there it was. The same architecture as always. The struggling sibling, the reset, the distraction from the actual problem. The idea that my money was the paint that would cover the mold on the wall. "Mom," I said, "a vow renewal in Sedona is not a reset. Weston needs a financial counselor and probably a bankruptcy attorney. That's what would actually help." She didn't respond to that. She just said, "I hope you're proud of yourself," and hung up. I blocked the group chat notifications. I didn't block anyone individually, not yet. I just needed quiet. That quiet lasted about 72 hours before Weston showed up at my apartment. I live on the 4th floor of a building with a buzzer system. When I saw his name on the intercom screen, I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about what my college friend had said. The fact that you're even considering this is the answer right there. I buzzed him up because I knew if I didn't do this now, I would spend months dreading the eventual confrontation. He looked rough. Not dramatic movie rough, but actually rough, the way people look when they've been sleeping badly and eating worse. He came in and sat on my couch without being invited to, which was very Weston. You destroyed us, he said, without preamble. I told the truth. In a group chat, with Tamsin's whole family in it. You put Tamsin's whole family in a group chat to pressure me. I just responded in kind. He ran his hand through his hair. You have no idea what we're dealing with. I have a pretty good idea, actually. I looked it up. That's insane. You looked up my financial records. I looked up public court filings. Which are public. Weston, why didn't you tell me? He didn't answer for a moment. Then, quietly, because you would have judged me. I would have worried about you. There's a difference. You would have looked at me the way you're looking at me right now. I'm not looking at you any particular way. I'm looking at my brother who is in serious trouble and who, instead of telling me the truth, tried to route $13,000 through a party for his in-laws in order to access my savings without asking me directly. The room went very still. Is that what you think this was? He said, and it wasn't really a question. The contractor lien means someone did work on your house that you didn't pay for. The Capital One judgment means you defaulted on a card. The second mortgage means you borrowed against the house when you were already underwater. And instead of having a conversation with me about any of that, you let Tamsin's family come after me in a group text for not financing a party. So yes, that's what I think this was. He put his face in his hands, and, for a moment, the anger drained out of him in a way that made him look very young, more like the kid he was when we were growing up. The one who used to get in over his head and then ask me to help him manage the fallout. I felt a pull toward him that was old and automatic. But I had learned something in the past week. The pull was real. The love was real. And I could honor both of those things without writing another check. I'm not going to give you $13,000 for a party, I said. But I'll sit down with you and Tamsin and help you find a nonprofit credit counseling agency. I'll help you understand your options. I'll be at every meeting if you want me there. That's what I can do. He looked up. Tamsin won't go for that. Then that's between you and Tamsin. She'll say you're trying to control us. She can say whatever she wants. I'm offering help with the actual problem. What you do with the offer is up to you. He left an hour later without agreeing to anything. He didn't slam the door. He just left. That felt like something. The next month was the loneliest stretch I can remember in recent years. My parents went cold. Not hostile, just distant in a way that communicates its own message. Phone calls got shorter. The family group chat went quiet. My birthday came and went in October with a text from my mom that said, "Happy birthday, honey, love you," which was fine, but which also contained none of the usual specifics. No mention of dinner plans, no question about whether I was coming home for the holidays. I stayed busy, I worked, I went to the gym. I had coffee with my Atlanta friends, the ones who exist entirely outside the orbit of my family, and I let them remind me what it felt like to be a person who was liked for her company and not her credit limit. I also started therapy for the first time in my life, which I had been resisting for years under the vague impression that I didn't need it. The first session I spent mostly crying, which embarrassed me. The second session my therapist said something that I wrote in my journal that night. You've been confusing proximity with connection. Those aren't the same thing. You can be standing right next to someone and be completely invisible to them. I thought about that for a long time. Thanksgiving came. I was not invited to the family dinner. Or rather, I was not invited. The subject just never came up in a way that constituted an invitation, which is its own kind of answer. I drove up to the mountains by myself and rented a small cabin for 4 days. I cooked a turkey breast and 2 sides for one and sat on the porch and watched the dark come in over the ridge and felt, underneath the sadness, something that surprised me. Gratitude, not for the situation, for the clarity. I heard through my mom and a brief warming of the silence in December that Weston and Tamsin had in fact ended up going to a credit counseling service, not the one I had recommended, a different one, which felt very on brand. But they went. The vow renewal was scaled back to a backyard dinner at Tamsin's parents' house that ended up costing about $800 total, which her siblings split. Tamsin's mom apparently cried and said it was perfect. So that happened without me and without $13,000, and it was apparently exactly what it needed to be. I found that out and sat with it in a complicated way for a while. It wasn't satisfying exactly. It didn't feel like winning. It just felt like evidence of something I had already suspected, that they had never needed what they told me they needed. They needed it to be a production. They needed the Sedona venue and the photographer and the catered dinner because that was the version of the story they wanted to tell. And they needed me to fund it because that's what I had been for years, the silent underwriter of other people's preferred narratives. The conversation that actually started to change things came in February from an unexpected direction. My mom called on a Sunday afternoon, unscheduled, and when I answered, she sounded different, quieter and more direct than her usual manner. "I've been doing some thinking," she said. I waited. "I looked at what you said in that group chat about the money you've given over the years." "Okay." "I didn't know it was that much," she said. "I knew about some of it. I didn't know all of it. Your father didn't know all of it either. We talked about it." "Okay," I said again, because I didn't know what else to say. "We were wrong to put that pressure on you with the vow renewal. I was wrong to forward that message as if it was just something to consider. That wasn't fair." She didn't say everything. She didn't account for every specific thing. It wasn't a perfect apology in the architectural sense. But there was something in her voice that had not been there before. A kind of discomfort that told me she had looked at something clearly and not looked away. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "We miss you," she said. "Your dad especially. He won't say it, but he asks about you every week." We talked for almost an hour that day. We didn't resolve everything. We didn't even get close to everything. But we made a plan for Easter. Me driving home, her making the lamb she always makes, the two of us sitting at the kitchen table in the particular way we used to sit before all of this got complicated. I haven't fully reconciled with Weston yet. We've texted a few times. Short things, normal things, a meme about a band we both like, a text when our neighbor's old dog passed away. The door is open, which is different from the door being fixed. Tamsin and I have not spoken. I'm not ready, and I don't think she is either. Maybe someday. Or maybe someday becomes the honest acknowledgement that some relationships don't recover, and that's not a failure. It's just a perimeter. What I know is this: I still have my $18,000. Not the full amount, because I did put some toward my own emergency fund reallocation and some toward a home repair I had been deferring. But most of it. More importantly, I have the number on my legal pad, the $31,000, and I've made a decision about it, not to demand repayment, because that's not realistic and also not the point. The point is that I know the number now. I see the shape of things clearly for the first time, and clarity, it turns out, is its own kind of inheritance. I still love my family. I think you can love people and also see them without the filter of what you wish they were. You can want closeness and also understand that closeness has to be built on something honest, or it's not closeness at all. It's just proximity. You can be generous without being a resource. You can be a sister without being a sponsor. I learned that late, but I learned it. I've thought a lot about the legal pad. The one I sat down with that night at my kitchen table, the one where I wrote out $31,460 in a column of numbers that I had never let myself look at all at once before. I didn't write it to feel righteous. I wrote it because I needed to see what my silence had actually cost me, not just in money, but in the habit I had built of making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. What I understand now, that I didn't understand then, is that how you treat people teaches them what to expect from you. Every time I wired money without being asked, every time I covered a shortfall and said nothing, I was writing a contract I didn't know I was signing. And the terms of that contract, as it turned out, were she gives, we take, and when she stops, we call it a character flaw. That's not malice on their part, not entirely. It's just what happens when a pattern goes unnamed long enough. It calcifies. It becomes the assumed shape of things. The thing about Weston is that I don't think he woke up one morning and decided to exploit his sister. I think he made one small choice to let me handle something, and then another, and then eventually, he stopped being able to imagine a version of events where he handled it himself. That's what happens when you outsource your discomfort consistently enough. You lose the muscle. And when someone finally says no, it doesn't register as a boundary. It registers as an attack. I had to stop being the person who made it easy for everyone else to avoid their own hard work. Not because I stopped loving them. I didn't. But because love that operates as a subsidy isn't love, it's a transaction, and eventually one party always feels cheated. In our case, I had been feeling cheated for years and telling myself I wasn't. The intelligence part of what I went through wasn't the decision to say no. That was just one moment. The intelligence was in finally reading the situation clearly, looking at the court filings, sitting with the legal pad, tracing the shape of a dynamic that I had been too afraid to name. Clarity is uncomfortable. But ignorance isn't kindness. It's just delayed pain with interest. And the resilience part, the part I'm still working on, honestly, is accepting that doing the right thing for yourself often feels terrible for a long time before it feels like anything else. The loneliest Thanksgiving of my adult life came directly from a decision I am still certain was correct. Those two things can both be true. You can be right and be sad about it at the same time. You don't have to choose. What I carried forward from this is simple and hard. Be honest about what you have, what you're willing to give, and what you need in return. Say those things out loud before they build up into a number on a legal pad. And when someone tells you that your worth to them is conditional on your usefulness, believe them the first time. Don't wait for the group chat.